welcome to Pod Strangely Warmed. I'm Daniel Hawkins, your host today, and today we are continuing a series of conversations exploring spiritual practices that shape and form our soul. If you've been with us over the last couple of weeks, I hope and pray that we may have introduced you to something new or invited you to experience something in a deeper way that has helped your walk with Christ. Today, we continue with the amazing Kristin Warthen and the amazing Melissa Turkett as we explore something that is frankly hard for each of us: silence and stillness.
Yeah.
And maybe stillness is easier, but three preachers in the room, silence is not a thing that we actually, Kristin and I, we've had this conversation before. You're actually pretty good at silence. I am not. I flunk out of the spiritual academy where you're supposed to leave the group setting where you're able to talk and then enter into silence for 24 hours. They gave me a roommate in my room, and I'm like, I got a roommate and I'm not supposed to talk. How is this supposed to work?
Again, when you register for double rooms, that happens.
The conflict of my spirit and my wallet don't always come together, but
struggle's real.
I know it is real. It is real. Melissa, what?
Yeah.
If you had to describe for us this silence and stillness kind of in a basic format, what is it beyond the most obvious sort of?
I mean, I think that part of it, honestly, is just what we would call meditation. So it's even something that we can invite not just our spirits in, but also the work of our minds into slowing down and being in the present moment. And I think that's one of the really powerful things about these two practices in particular is they are an invitation not to live in the past, not to worry about the ifs of the futures, but to stay right here, grounded in the present moment, knowing that in this moment, you're not going to change anything for worse or for better or for indifference, but that you are willing to say yes and to show up. And I think the outcome of when you practice, and it is like, to me, silence and stillness is one of those practices that more so than any other feels like building up a muscle, that the more that you practice with it, the more that you start with lighter reps of it, right? Or shorter amounts of times, the stronger you're going to get with it, but also the stronger the outcomes are going to be that you see. And when you practice a life of silence and stillness, it makes you a better listener. It makes you able to catch the things that maybe aren't being said. It allows you to not just like have the quick off the cuff, like I got to respond to this, but have the thoughtful, what is the deeper response I'm being invited to give in this? And it makes you just, I think, love people better. And as a result, too, you'll also learn how to love yourself better if you can be with yourself exactly as you are in the present moment. Yeah.
Well, and I love, so first, when we hear silence, we just hear about not talking, right? Like I know in our household with a lot of us, there's always noise. And so often I long for silence, but my brain is still going. Yeah. It's the experience of silence, but not the spiritual practice of silence.
Right.
Right. And that distinction is really helpful, right? That because the spiritual practice is an invitation to be fully present in the moment. I can experience silence while I'm washing the dishes. I can experience silence when I go out on the back porch. But if my brain is still spinning about what is coming on the next 6 months of our strategic plan at church, or, what's coming tomorrow, or who the Cowboys are going to draft tonight, or anything like that, I'm not living in the moment that way. Yeah.
And so it is this beautiful way to remind ourselves that you can let go of what's going around you and practice silence, even if you're in a setting where silence isn't true silence all around you. So you can practice it when you do say, I'm washing the dishes, but I'm going to silence and still the mind while my body is busy. And that's actually a practice that can ease you into the practices of both silence, not so much stillness, but at least into the silence side of it is giving the body a task to be embodied with and it actually goes back to one of our most common traditions in our practice of worship. The reason why we have liturgies or creeds or the Lord's Prayer that we say week after week isn't to be boring or because we can't come up with something new to say. We've got 3 pastors in a room. We could endlessly ad nauseum come up with like more things to say,
right?
We're
people of the words.
We're people of the words. Yeah. Not just the word.
But
as I tell my daughter, we have all the words.
Yes.
Yes. But have you ever had an experience in worship? For me, it happens more often with music, but singing a beloved song where you're either saying the creed or you're singing the song and your mind knows it so well that it kind of goes on autopilot, that it allows something of the Spirit to open to the bigger presence of God. That is the design of the repetitiveness of nature, is actually to free us to draw closer in communion with God. And so in the same way, when we take on those practices of silence and stillness, we're inviting ourselves to be in deeper presence, connection, and communion with the presence of the divine. And this is one of those things that it's like blows my mind, like as much as we know it as pastors, that the divine would care to spend time with me, just being silent, just being still. Not, rarely do I ever come out with some grand revelation, but I come out with peace a lot of times, even if it's just like, it feels so minuscule, but sometimes it's that grace that's overwhelming too. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, when we talk about the thoughts that kind of run through our heads, right? Daniel, you mentioned, I can be doing the dishes or whatever, my brain's in my admin board meeting or in my finance meeting or, whatever is going on, right? I've got to talk to that teacher about my kid's grade, whatever.
Yeah.
And, with the practice of silence, like we can acknowledge that those thoughts exist, because that's what makes silence hard for us to get settle into. Is we have that running list. Our brains want to convince us that we need to be doing something.
Yep.
And to be,
and our culture doubles down on it too. Yeah.
And we're taught so often that being silent and being still, doing nothing. But listen. Creation ex nihilo, if you want to talk about that, something out of nothing, like let nothing rest for a minute so that something can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love, that was one of the things that was so powerful to me when I first started practicing silence and stillness together, because you can practice these things separately or you can practice them together. Was the permission that thoughts are going to come into your mind, right? And that when I first started engaging with this practice, I try and put up these blocks of like, no. And the more that you do that, it's like the harder and faster they come. And like, you're going to lose. But instead it was Dr. Abito over at Perkins who said that, and I know he's, taken it from others, but that treat them like clouds. That you can acknowledge them, but just like the clouds, you can't grab onto it and hold it. You can't say, hold your shape, but instead you acknowledge it. And just like the clouds, you let it pass. And when I started giving myself permission to say, I need to think about this or that or whatever it may be. And I see you there, but I'm going to let you go. They do pass on. And again, like when I'm in a regular rhythm of this practice, the less and less clouds that I notice. Just like, a lot of times we can go about our day not ever noticing a single cloud. But when I'm out of practice, I'm going to notice a lot of clouds as I'm getting started on that work. But the more that you go about it, the more that you're willing to practice it, even if it's just 2 minutes a day. And even if it's just choosing one of, I'm going to sit in stillness as the first thing in the morning, or even lay in bed in stillness, though I would go back to sleep. So I wouldn't recommend that one. Or perhaps, I'm going to pour my coffee and I'm going to go stand outside. And before I take the first sip of coffee, but while it's warming my hands, I'm just going to be, right? That there's something really powerful. And when you create it into a natural rhythm that you already have, like getting your cup of coffee in the morning, it makes it easier to access it.
Yeah.
And honestly, for me, when I'm in these rhythms of practicing stillness and silence over and over again, I only get up to about 10 minutes. And I find that for me, that is more than enough. That doesn't need to be a practice of, 30 minutes, an hour, though for some people, it is really powerful to sit and be grounded in that space for that length of time.
They have the gift of time.
They do that I do not have.
They do.
But also I'm wondering, have you come to the space or ever had the space? Because I don't think it's constant. Well, for me, it's not constant. But have you come to the space where once you've acknowledged all the clouds, I love that image.
Yeah.
I talk about shelving. So the image of
yeah.
clouds is good.
Yeah.
I use the mental health language of shelving. Like,
Yeah.
hi, welcome to the party. You don't get to rule it. But if I practice it long enough, if I shelve them long enough, eventually I can kind of just be like, I've got permission not only to not keep track of the list, I've got permission to not necessarily, I want to say this correctly because I don't want it to sound like I'm saying, don't be with God. No. You're being with God. Not to necessarily expect God to say something. Yeah. Right? Like, I give myself permission to just be. And in those moments, when I reach that, it is complete silence. Yes. And it's so beautiful.
And I think with that, when we get to that point, I think that's like the true touchstone of these practices, which is that it takes us back to like that first kind of one of those first gifts of creation, which is that God calls us good. Yeah. God calls us good before we farm the earth, before we name the animals, before we come up with strategic initiatives for our churches. Like, God looks at us and says, this is good. And so it is this beautiful thing to allow ourselves to acknowledge that we are good and we are worthy of this rest, of this stillness, of the silence, not because of anything we produce. And that's actually an image and a metaphor I've recently brought back into worship some for myself, is this idea that worship is actually a royal waste of time. Because if we call God the divine royalty, like God gets like, nothing out of art, but like God is willing to waste this time with us in worship. And I think the same thing in stillness and silence is this invitation for us to waste time, but in a way that is actually really beautiful and meaningful, that is that beautiful paradox constantly of our faith. Because, in the practice of our faith, we know it's not actually a waste of time, but our culture tells us that's a waste of time.
That's the language of redemption, right? God wastes nothing.
Right.
Nothing's ever wasted.
Yeah.
Even the worst, deepest brokenness can be redeemed. Yeah. As you were talking about that moment of just silence, and it's sitting with God, not expecting to hear the voice of God, like that kind of thing, right? And we think about the most intimate relationships of our lives, whether they're with siblings, with spouses, with deep friends we've had forever and ever, with mentor, whoever they are, right? It's a marker in a relationship when you can just sit and be, right? When there doesn't have to be anything going on and you don't face that impulse to go, oh, I got to fill this space. Oh, I got to fill this time. What, that anxious energy, right? And so to have that as a metaphor, right, and as a journey is really important. Jason Valendi, our good friend, introduced me to the Thomas Merton quote on the clouds and the shelving. He says each one of those moments where you're trying to be at peace with God and the mind just continues to spin, that instead of receiving those with self-judgment and self-loathing, right, to use it as practice to say, this is a chance where I get to practice returning to God. And that you talked about using a muscle, right? That each one of those opportunities is not something we should lament, but something we should celebrate as an invitation to practice returning to God. And so if you've got to practice returning 17 times in the 5 minutes of silence, cool. Yeah. Just receive it as information and know that that's just a part of it. It is this act of intentional returning, and celebrate the fact that you chose, instead of chasing the rabbit, to go put that in your Kroger grocery basket on your hat, right? To return to God instead, right? And so I think for so many of us for whom silence may be a challenge, right? We've talked a lot about silence and stillness as two sides of the same coin. In many practices they are, but they can be independent, right? Yeah. In the early days with silence for me, mowing the yard was a space where I could find silence. My body was doing a mindless activity. And, frankly, my self-expectations for my yard is if it can be a B, it's all good, right? It doesn't have to be an A+. I don't have that internal drive when it comes to my yard. And so, like, the need for perfection in that space meant that I could be silent and present with God and just go walk up and walk back and walk up walk back. And I know that that's not that separate and distinct from stillness, but for me, that practice was an invitation into the depth where the two come together.
And if we can return to God in these really small, like safe, even moments of just coming back to silence, coming back to stillness, then how much better do we get at it when the stakes are raised, And in a similar fashion, on the flip side of that coin with stillness, for me sometimes is kind of a separate entity from silence. If I'm practicing stillness, sometimes it helps me to actually visualize a space that I go to. So it's not perfect silence of the mind in a sense, but I am able to embody this space of stillness in my body much better when I can see this place. And for me, I have a very specific, and I find that that's helpful when you have a very specific in your mind's eye that you can go to. For me, it's this place in northern Oklahoma at the Wichita Mountain Wildlife Refuge. And I don't think I ever want to go there again because I know what's in my mind is not what it actually looks like. Like,
it's kind better in your head.
Yeah. I've kind of like, exactly. Yeah. I've crafted it to be the space that I need to go. And I think that that's a beautiful practice. If you want to practice stillness, where is the holy place that you can draw in your mind's eye, whether it's a real place or a fake place that you've crafted. I had a friend once who, for her, she was what looked like a cave, but that was covered in feathers, going back to the psalmist of that, I cover you over with my wing. And so being in that wing space for her.
I am so fascinated by this. And here's why. Yeah. I'm a word person, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Imagine that. I'm a word person.
# doctorate with
prepositions.
grammar, prepositions and theology.
Prepositions.
Okay.
That's right.
Yes.
Prepositional faith. I'm really
You should trademark that, right? Just in advance.
Yeah.
Slap a
it was
trademark
here on the
that.
podcast.
Right. There we go.
We know that it's going to be
Hawkins owns a
Kristin's.
No.
Yeah.
All right, Bright Divinity, if you want to pay my tuition and bring me in. No, so what fascinates me about that is I'm very much a word person. I can see words in my mind. I'm not visual. You tell me to close my eyes and imagine an apple, and I will close my eyes, and it is nothing but darkness.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that place, right? So for me, stillness is much more about rootedness. And so it's when I totally stole this, as I steal most of my things. I stole it from a podcast, and actually I think a seminary professor. But I open every sermon. I invite my congregation when we enter prayer to say, God, as we ground our bodies, right? Like I think about groundedness and rootedness and being aware of God with me, and of my physical location now, as opposed to where I might imagine myself to be.
And I love
because
this.
I've got no visual imagination.
Yeah.
I will be nowhere.
Well, I love this so much because it's the beauty of the way that each of us practice it that's different, and that both are beautiful and neither is right nor wrong. It's just the way that we engage with it. And so I think that's a great invitation of this series and this season of the podcast is, take what works for you and helps draw you closer to God, and leave the ones that don't work for you behind, because some things are going to draw you closer to God and some things are going to act more like a roadblock.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Like I think about, and I know this is a totally different podcast, so we're not going to dive too far into this, but I think about silence for someone who has a constant running dialogue in terms of mental health, right? Someone who may be bipolar. And so in a manic phase, their words are going. Silence is actually not a healthy practice.
Yeah.
For all of them. Some of them, yes, but silence may not be a healthy practice. And so it is what works, what truly draws me into God, what makes me aware of the divine and of God in and through and around and with me. And if one of these practices does not do that, it's okay. This is not like do all these practices and
we're not giving you another Jesus checklist. Right.
You get an A+ in being a Christian. Way to go. No gold stars here. It's truly what connects you with God.
It's tools for the toolkit, right?
Yeah.
Expressions as the invitation, right? To say, when you find yourself in a space where silence connects you, we want to make sure that you have that tool to connect deeply to God, right?
Yeah.
The river of stillness is that kind of space. Stillness is interesting in that, as much as silence is a challenge for us, stillness is culturally, a substantial challenge for so many of us, right? We are people of movement. We are people, all the metaphors of our life are driven by movement, right? We have the journey of faith. We have the ladders we climb. It's all, we walk the road or we drive the road.
Life is a highway.
Life is a highway. Yeah, right. These metaphors are movement oriented, right? And to be still is to become a speed bump.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Inert and rooted and present. And that's just a challenge sometimes. And
we see this rhythm with Christ, right? There are times that we should be on the move. We should be going. We should be on the journey. We should set our faces towards Jerusalem and go.
Yeah.
But also Jesus took time in important moments to go be alone, to go and pray with God without anyone else around, or, bringing the disciples and saying, you wait here. And he goes on further and then comes back. It's like, why are you sleeping? Right. So stillness and silence isn't sleeping either. Right.
No.
Although to be fair, I do adhere to the mantra that sleep too is a form of prayer.
No. Yeah. But there's a rhythm, right? Of we should be going, but then there should be a rhythm of stopping. And being as well, that both are worthy of honoring.
John Mark Comer in the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, right?
Yeah.
He draws us back to the idea of the eremos, right? The wilderness, the unknown, the place where so often we can encounter God. Yeah. But it's a place that the Spirit often invites us to go, but we also have to choose to go because culturally we're not going to see it. And it affects even us as preachers, right? I don't have the ego to assume that my calendar is any more full than anybody else's, but ours are just as full as any other working professionals who have this and this and this and this and family commitments and work commitments and just hobbies and things we enjoy, right? Y'all have pop culture commitments that I don't sometimes, right?
But you have sports commitments that we don't have.
Yes.
Exactly.
And it's NBA playoff time, and so those games go until very late in the evening, and so which inhibits the holy rest of sleep sometimes, which is not a pleasant experience. But thank God for coffee. We probably should have a podcast on the spiritual power and gift of coffee at some point, but maybe not for today. Not for the day on silence and stillness.
No.
Too much caffeine.
Do a
in the
series
system.
on minor miracles.
Yes.
Ooh.
One episode will be coffee and caffeine.
That's right. Gifts from the earth.
Yes. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Thanks. It's like
Y'all
I'm
taking notes over there?
right?
Okay. Breaking the fourth wall for a second, but that's okay. It is a fascinating invitation to us all. And I love that you named, because I'm a person of words and I'm a person of visuals, and how both can invite us into that place, right? And that even if this journey is different for each of us, the invitation is to kind of hit pause, both on the music and the storylines that are going in our heads, but also with our bodies, into silence and into stillness. If we were going to experience this today, what would that look like to experience it together?
Yeah. So, I think I can lead us through a brief moment of 10 minutes of just silence for the end of this.
Okay, perfect. That's podcasting perfection.
Yeah. But no, I can lead us.
Everyone loves dead air.
Through just everyone loves it. Through just a way that we can invite our bodies and our minds into a calmer moment that can be some tools that you can use in your own practice that get you to that moment of silence, to that place of stillness. And so I'd invite you where you find yourself to make yourself 10% more comfortable. If you're able, close your eyes. If you're not, you're driving, keep driving. If you're watching us, keep watching if you wish. But can you slow your breathing? Let it be smooth and steady, but deepen it just a little. Can you relax the jawline? Remove the tongue from the roof of your mouth? Can you let your shoulders fall heavy? You draw the crown of your head just a little higher. And then hear this passage from Psalm 46, verse 10. Perhaps it'll be quite familiar. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Amen. Sometimes just that inviting to slow down, to remind yourself to do these steps that help you just.
Yeah.
And then using a beloved piece of scripture that, whether it's that Psalm 46 or something else that speaks to you. And I find that for myself, when I do it, I'll do several rounds of that, of be still and know that I'm God, be still and know, be still and be, right? Like, and just, and oftentimes, depending on how hurried my day is how fast I do it. But the more I sink into it, the slower I can get and finally just release it.
Yeah. Well, it as you say that, April and I have recently started a yoga practice, which is interesting and fascinating.
I love it.
6'5" and doing yoga. But so often they close, and I can't remember the correct term for it, with the pose where you are laying flat on your back.
Corpse
Shavasana.
Corpse pose, yes.
Or Shavasana, if you want to use the...
I like corpse pose. But that, and how periodically they will invite us to there earlier in the movement, in the time, and my body and my soul aren't quite ready for it.
Yep.
But by the time I get 20 minutes in or 25 minutes in, or even on the 10-minute ones, right, there's a level of the journey from be still and know to be still and know that I, right? Just that backing for, so that by the time you get there, it's like, oh, I could not move. This is what it means to be like literally rooted in the ground now.
And you really can in those moments, or I don't want to speak for you, I really can in those moments. Like by the time I get there, I'm in corpse pose or Shavasana, I can just feel my body taking in that whole practice.
Yes.
And it is like a moment where everything begins to come together and synergize, right? There's some new muscle memory being formed there.
Yeah.
And I wonder if spiritually, right, that silence and stillness is our corpse pose, where all the ways God is working begin to come together, right?
Out of nothing.
In these new
something.
ways.
Yeah.
Out of nothing, something.
Amen. Thank you for joining us today. I hope and pray that this has been a gift to you. I know it has been a gift to me. I am thankful to both of you for your joy, for your witness, for your invitation to us all to shut up and slow down so that we might encounter the divine. Because God is so deeply met us, even just in this momentary practice, or at least met me. And I'm different leaving this place today than I was coming in. So thank you again for joining us today. Know that we're going to continue these conversations in the weeks to come as we engage in forming and shaping our spirits so that we might have the heart of Christ, that we might walk with Christ daily, and that we might be just a little bit more the people who God is inviting us to become. I'm Daniel Hawkins. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed, and we will see you next time.
St. Teresa of Lisieux used to fall asleep during prayer all the time. Just so you know.
Love it.